The Midnight Train to Aurora Valley. A gentle journey on a slow, magical train that passes glowing forests, quiet lakes, and starlit tunnels. Episode 1, The Platform at the End of the World. The clock tower struck midnight as Eleanor Hayes stepped onto platform 13, her weathered leather suitcase heavy in her hand. She had searched for this place for 3 years, following whispers and half-remembered stories her grandmother had told her as a child. The directions had been vague, almost dreamlike. Take the last train on Tuesday. Get off at the station that doesn't exist. Look for the door behind the old bookshop. Yet here she stood, having followed those impossible instructions, and somehow they had led her exactly where she needed to be. The platform was unlike any station Eleanor had ever seen. Victorian lampposts cast pools of golden light across marble floors inlaid with constellations that seemed to shift and breathe. The ceiling stretched impossibly high, disappearing into a darkness that sparkled with what might have been stars or might have been something else entirely. The air itself felt different here, thicker, sweeter, charged with possibility. A few other travelers waited in the warm glow, each lost in their own thoughts, their faces carrying the same mixture of hope and exhaustion that Eleanor felt in her bones. She had come here to find her way back to something she'd lost, though she couldn't quite name what it was. A sense of wonder, perhaps. A belief in magic that the grinding wheels of adult life had slowly worn away. Or maybe just a good night's sleep, free from the anxiety that had plagued her for months. That tightness in her chest that never quite went away. The feeling of living someone else's life while her true self waited patiently in the wings. A woman sat on a bench nearby, knitting something that glowed faintly blue with each stitch. The needles clicked in a rhythm that seemed to harmonize with Eleanor's heartbeat. Beside her, a young man clutched a violin case, his fingers tapping restlessly against the worn leather, as if playing silent melodies only he could hear. An elderly gentleman in a tweed suit read a newspaper that seemed to be writing itself, the headlines shifting and changing as he turned each page. None of them spoke, but there was a comfortable silence among them, the quiet understanding of fellow travelers embarking on the same mysterious journey. Eleanor set down her suitcase and pulled out the ticket that had arrived in her mailbox 3 days ago. It was made of thick cream paper that felt like silk between her fingers, with her name written in flowing script that seemed to move like water. Below her name, simple words: The Midnight Train to Aurora Valley. Departure when you're ready. Return when you're renewed. She had not ordered this ticket, had not signed up for any mysterious journey. Yet somehow, she knew it was meant for her, had been waiting for her, perhaps for her entire life. The ticket had appeared on a Tuesday morning, tucked between her electric bill and a furniture store catalog. At first, she'd thought it was junk mail, some elaborate marketing scheme. But when she'd held it, really held it, she'd felt something. A pull, a recognition, a whisper that said, "This is what you've been waiting for." A sound began to build in the distance, a low melodic hum that made the air vibrate with possibility. The other travelers stirred, gathering their belongings with practiced movements that suggested they had made this journey before. The knitting woman smiled at Eleanor, her eyes kind and knowing, crinkled at the corners with the wisdom of someone who had seen much and judged little. "First time?" she asked, her voice like warm honey. Eleanor nodded, suddenly nervous. "Is it that obvious?" "You have the look," the woman said. tucking her glowing yarn into a carpet bag covered in patches from places Eleanor had never heard of. Crystalline shores, the whispering desert, the city of eternal autumn. The look of someone who's forgotten how to dream. Don't worry, dear. The train remembers you. Before Eleanor could ask what that meant, the train arrived. It didn't pull into the station so much as materialize, as if it had always been there and they simply hadn't been able to see it until that exact moment. The midnight train was a marvel of impossible engineering. A locomotive that seemed to be carved from moonlight and midnight blue metal, with windows that reflected not the station around them, but distant landscapes Eleanor had never seen. Steam rose from its engines, but instead of smoke, it was made of silver mist that smelled of jasmine and old books and rain on summer grass. The carriages stretched back into the distance, each one unique. Some appeared to be made of polished wood with brass fittings, others of crystal that chimed softly in an unfelt breeze, and still others of materials Eleanor couldn't identify. Something between water and glass, between starlight and steel. The conductor stepped down from the first carriage, and Eleanor's breath caught. He was tall and ageless, with dark skin that seemed to hold galaxies beneath its surface and eyes that changed color with each blink. Green, then gold, then the deep purple of twilight. He wore a uniform of midnight blue with silver buttons that looked like tiny moons, and a cap adorned with a badge in the shape of a compass rose. "Good evening, travelers," he said, his voice resonating with harmonics that made Eleanor feel both fully awake and peacefully drowsy at once. "Welcome aboard the midnight train to Aurora Valley. I am Conductor Orion, and I will be your guide on this journey. Please, step aboard and find the carriage that calls to you. Your seat will be waiting." The elderly gentleman was first up the steps, moving with surprising sprightness. The young man with the violin followed, then the knitting woman, who paused to pat Eleanor's hand encouragingly before ascending. Eleanor picked up her suitcase and approached the train. Up close, she could see that the metal of its construction was engraved with intricate patterns, mathematical equations that dissolved into poetry, musical notation that became maps, stories written in languages both familiar and utterly alien. She reached out and touched the side of the train, and it was warm, pulsing with a gentle heartbeat. "Don't be afraid," Conductor Orion said softly, appearing beside her with uncanny swiftness. "The train has been waiting for you, Eleanor Hayes. Your journey began long before you found that ticket. Tonight, you simply choose to continue it." "How do you know my name?" Eleanor asked, though somehow the question felt irrelevant. "The train knows all its passengers," he replied with a smile that held secrets and kindness in equal measure. "It knows what you've lost and what you're searching for. It knows the path you must take to find your way to Aurora Valley. Come. Your carriage is the third one back, made of amber wood and starlight. You'll know it when you see it." Eleanor climbed the steps, which were solid beneath her feet despite looking like they were made of condensed clouds. Inside the train, the corridor stretched longer than should have been possible, lined with doors of different colors and styles. She walked past a red lacquered door from which came the scent of cinnamon, past a silver door that hummed with electricity, past a door that appeared to be made of living ivy. Then she saw it. The third door, just as Conductor Orion had said, was made of amber wood that glowed from within, and its handle was shaped like a constellation she almost recognized. Eleanor opened the door and stepped inside, and the journey truly began. Episode 2, the glass lakes of reflection. Eleanor woke to the sound of music. Not the music of instruments, but something more fundamental, the music of light on water, of morning breaking, of the world breathing. She opened her eyes to find the train filled with a soft, shimmering radiance that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. She sat up, pushing the blanket aside, and looked out the window. Her breath caught in her throat. The luminous forest had given way to a landscape of water. Lakes stretched in all directions, each one made of glass or something like glass. Perfectly smooth, perfectly clear, perfectly still. The train ran along a causeway that seemed to float just above the surface. And beneath them, Eleanor could see straight through the transparent water to depths that should have been dark, but instead glowed with their own internal light. The sky above was the color of pearl, neither fully day nor fully night, holding both sunrise and starlight in impossible balance. Cast no reflection on the glass lakes. Instead, the lakes reflected things that weren't there, or rather, things that were there but invisible to ordinary sight. Eleanor pressed her face to the window and saw wonders. In one lake, the reflection showed a city of spires and bridges, delicate as lace, built from something that looked like crystallized music. In another, she saw a garden where flowers the size of houses bloomed in slow motion, their petals unfurling over what might have been hours or days. A third lake reflected a library with endless shelves, books flying like birds between them, pages fluttering open to show stories writing themselves in real time. The glass lakes of reflection. Came a voice behind her, and Eleanor turned to find a woman standing in her doorway. She wasn't Conductor Orion, but she wore a similar uniform of midnight blue, though hers had silver embroidery in the pattern of waves and ripples. Her hair was long and the color of moonlight, and her eyes were the exact shade of the lakes outside, clear and deep and full of secrets. "I'm Conductor Luna," the woman said with a warm smile. "Orion asked me to check on you this morning. How did you sleep?" "Better than I have in years," Eleanor admitted, surprised to realize it was true. She felt rested in a way she'd almost forgotten was possible, as if the train's gentle movement had rocked away years of accumulated exhaustion. "The midnight train has that effect," Luna said, stepping into the compartment with a grace that made her seem like she was gliding rather than walking. "May I join you for breakfast?" Before Eleanor could answer, Luna produced a small bell from her pocket and rang it once, a clear chime that seemed to resonate with the music of the lakes outside. Immediately, the table between the seats transformed. The silver tea service was replaced by a full breakfast spread, fresh pastries that steamed gently, fruit that glowed with impossible colors, scrambled eggs that somehow tasted like morning sunshine, and coffee that smelled like every good memory Eleanor had ever had. "Please," Eleanor said, gesturing to the seat across from her. "I'd love the company." They ate in comfortable silence for a while, Eleanor too mesmerized by the changing views outside to make much conversation. The train moved slowly along the causeway, and each lake they passed showed different reflections. One showed Eleanor herself, but not as she was now. She saw herself as a child of 7, splashing in a puddle with complete abandon, laughing with her whole body. Then herself at 15, standing on a stage, holding a painting she'd created, her face glowing with pride before self-consciousness had learned to dim that light. Then herself at 22, dancing alone in her apartment, moving with a freedom she'd lost somewhere in the years since. "What are these reflections?" Eleanor asked softly. "Why am I seeing myself?" "The glass lakes reflect truth," Luna explained, sipping her coffee. "Not the truth of what is, but the truth of what could be, what was, what might yet become." This stretch of the journey is where passengers confront their own reflections, the selves they've lost, the selves they might find again, the selves they're afraid to become. As if to demonstrate her point, the train passed another lake, and this time Eleanor saw herself as she might have been if she'd made different choices. In this reflection, she was teaching art to children in a sun-filled studio, her hands covered in paint, her smile genuine and unguarded. The vision was so vivid, so real, that Eleanor felt a sharp pang of loss for this life she'd never lived. "I gave up painting," she said quietly, not sure why she was confessing this to a stranger. "After college, everyone said it wasn't practical, that I needed a real job. So I went into marketing. I'm good at it, but You're not happy," Luna finished gently. "I'm not unhappy," Eleanor protested. But the words felt hollow even as she said them. I don't know. Somewhere along the way, I stopped feeling things as deeply, stopped noticing beauty, stopped letting myself get excited about anything. I wake up, go to work, come home, watch television, go to sleep, repeat. I'm 35, and I feel like I'm 90. "That's why you're here," Luna said. "The midnight train doesn't come for people who are happy with their lives. It comes for those who've lost their way, who need to be reminded of who they really are beneath all the compromises and practicalities and slow dimming of their inner light." The train entered a tunnel, and for a moment, everything went dark except for small lights that lined the walls like stars. When they emerged, they were in a different part of the lake region, and the water here was darker, the reflections more troubling. Eleanor saw herself burned out and exhausted, sitting at a desk at 3 in the morning, her eyes hollow. She saw herself at 40, at 50, at 60, growing more tired, more disconnected, more like a ghost of a person than an actual living being. She saw herself old and alone, looking back on a life of careful choices and safe decisions with nothing but regret. "I don't want that to be my future," Eleanor whispered, tears pricking her eyes. "It doesn't have to be," Luna said firmly. "These are possible futures, Eleanor, not certain ones. The lakes show you what might happen if you continue on your current path, yes, but they also show you the alternatives. Look." She pointed to another lake, and Eleanor saw different visions. She painting again, creating art that moved people to tears. She teaches workshops, helping others reconnect with their creativity. She travels to beautiful places, sketching in journals filled with color and life. Herself older but vibrant, surrounded by students and friends and work she loved. Her face lined with laugh lines rather than stress. "How do I get there?" Eleanor asked. "To that future instead of the other one? That's what the journey to Aurora Valley is for," Luna said. "Each night, each landscape teaches you something. The luminous forest showed you your forgotten dreams, the things you've let go that still wait for you to reclaim them. The glass lakes are showing you the consequences of your choices, past, present, and future. They're asking you to truly see yourself, without the filters and stories you tell yourself about who you are and who you have to be." The train continued through the deep reflection, and Eleanor couldn't look away from the vision in the water. The woman she could become, vibrant and alive, living authentically and joyfully, creating beauty and sharing it with the world. Episode 3. The Crystal Caverns of Sound. Eleanor woke to singing. Not human singing, but something more primal and strange. The sound of the earth itself making music. She opened her eyes to find her compartment filled with colored light that danced and pulsed in rhythm with the wordless melodies that filled the air. They were inside a mountain, or rather, inside a crystal cavern so vast that calling it a mountain seemed inadequate. The train tracks ran through the center of a space that stretched upward and outward into distances too great for Eleanor to fully comprehend. Every surface, walls, ceiling, floor, was made of crystal formations that ranged from tiny sprouting clusters to massive pillars larger than redwood trees. And each crystal sang. Some produced low, resonant notes that Eleanor felt in her chest more than heard with her ears. Others created high, delicate chimes that danced through the air like visible light. Together, they formed a symphony of impossible complexity, hundreds or thousands of different tones weaving together into something that was simultaneously chaotic and perfectly harmonious. Eleanor pressed her hands against the window, utterly entranced. The crystals came in every color imaginable and several that shouldn't have been possible. Blues that were somehow also gold, reds that contained echoes of violet, greens that shifted into sounds rather than remaining purely visual. Each color produced its own unique note, and the notes combined and separated and recombined in patterns that felt almost like language. A knock at her door pulled her attention away from the window. She called out permission to enter and found herself face to face with a new conductor. A young man with warm brown skin and hair that seemed to be made of the same crystalline material as the caverns outside, catching light and refracting it into rainbow patterns. "Good morning," he said with a grin that was infectious. "I'm Conductor Harmony. Orion and Luna told me about you. Thought you might like some company exploring the crystal caverns of sound." "I'd love that," Eleanor said, realizing she was hungry for conversation, for understanding of what she was experiencing. "What is this place? Why do the crystals sing?" "Because that's their nature," Harmony said, settling into the seat across from her and gesturing broadly at the wonders outside. "Everything in the universe has its own frequency, its own song. Most of the time, humans can't hear it, the music of stars and stones and growing things. But here, in the crystal caverns, the songs become audible. The crystals are amplifiers and translators, taking the hidden music of existence and making it something we can perceive." The train slowed as they entered a chamber where thousands of tiny crystals grew in spiral patterns on the walls, each one producing a note slightly different from its neighbors. The effect was like being inside a music box made by gods, delicate, intricate, impossibly beautiful. "Why are we here?" Eleanor asked. "I mean, what is this leg of the journey supposed to teach me?" Harmony leaned back, considering her question. "The glass lakes were about seeing, really seeing yourself and your possible futures. The crystal caverns are about listening, really listening, not just to the world around you, but to the voice inside you that knows what you need, what you truly want. Most people spend their entire lives drowning out that voice with noise. Other people's expectations, society's demands, the constant chatter of a busy mind. Here, you learn to hear again." As if on cue, the train entered a quieter section where the crystals produced low, meditative tones that seemed to still Eleanor's thoughts. The constant anxiety that usually buzzed in the background of her mind. Worries about work, about money, about whether she was doing life right. All of it faded to a whisper, and beneath it, she heard something else. A quiet voice said, "Paint. Just that. Paint. Not you should paint, or you ought to paint, or it would be nice if you painted. Just a simple, certain truth. Paint. This is what you're meant to do. This is who you are." "I hear it," Eleanor whispered. "My voice. The true one, not the one that's always second-guessing and worrying." "Good," Harmony said. "That's the first step. Hearing it is one thing. The next challenge is learning to trust it, to let it guide you even when it contradicts all the other voices telling you what you should do." The train stopped at a platform carved entirely from rose quartz that hummed with a deep, warm frequency. Harmony stood and offered his hand. "Come on. There's something I want to show you. We have a 2-hour stop here." Eleanor took his hand and let him lead her off the train and into the crystal caverns. The moment her feet touched the platform, she felt the vibration of the crystal's song through her entire body. It was like being tuned, like having every cell aligned to the frequency of something fundamental and true. Harmony led her along a path that wound between towering crystal formations. Other passengers were exploring too. She saw the young man with the violin standing before a formation of blue crystals, playing his instrument. The crystals responded to his music, their light pulsing in rhythm with his bow strokes. And together, musicians and minerals created something neither could have achieved alone. The knitting woman sat in a grove of green crystals, her glowing yarn now producing its own quiet melody as her needles clicked in time with the ambient music. Even her knitting had become part of the symphony. "Everyone finds their own way to interact with the caverns," Harmony explained as they walked. "Some through music, some through movement, some through stillness. For you, I thought we might try something different." He led her into a smaller chamber where a single massive crystal formation dominated the space. It was unlike the others. Instead of producing sound, it seemed to absorb it, creating a sphere of perfect silence around itself. The crystal was clear as glass and smooth as a mirror, and it stood at least 15 feet tall. "This is the listening stone," Harmony said softly, his voice somehow clear despite the silence-inducing properties of the crystal. "It doesn't sing. Instead, it listens and it reflects back what it hears. Not the sounds you make with your mouth, but the truths you carry in your heart. Are you willing to try?" Eleanor nodded, feeling both drawn to and slightly afraid of the massive crystal. "Just place your hands on it," Harmony instructed. "Close your eyes and listen, not with your ears, but with everything you are." Eleanor approached the listening stone and placed both palms flat against its cool surface. The moment she made contact, the world shifted, and she heard everything. Episode 4, The Garden of Lost Hours. Eleanor woke to the scent of growing things. After 3 nights of magical soundscapes, glowing forests, singing crystals, the hum of the train itself, she'd almost forgotten what ordinary earth and plants smelled like. But this was no ordinary garden. The train had emerged from the starlit tunnels into full daylight, though the sun hanging in the sky was unlike any Eleanor had ever seen. It was golden and warm, but also somehow multiple, as if several suns occupied the same space, creating light that came from all directions at once. They were traveling through a garden so vast it stretched to every horizon. But unlike the wild, ethereal beauty of the luminous forest, this garden was cultivated, intentional. Paths wound through carefully tended beds. Trellises supported climbing vines heavy with flowers that changed color as she watched. Fruit trees bore blossoms and ripe fruit simultaneously. Vegetables grew in spiraling patterns that were mathematical and organic all at once. And everywhere throughout the garden were clocks. Sundials made of living flowers that rearranged themselves to show the time. Water clocks where streams flowed upward as often as down. Hourglasses filled with seeds instead of sand, the seeds sprouting as they fell. Clock towers made of twisted vines, their faces showing times that couldn't be correct. Some read 13 o'clock, others spun backward, still others showed times that didn't exist. Half past forever, quarter to never. Eleanor stepped closer to her window, fascinated. In the garden beds, she could see people working, passengers from the train, she realized. They were planting, weeding, harvesting, tending. Each person moved with a kind of peaceful focus she recognized from the best moments of her own creative work. That state of flow where time ceased to mean anything. A knock at her door announced the arrival of yet another conductor. This one was neither young nor old, male nor female, but something fluid and indefinable. They had skin the color of rich soil and eyes that held the green of new leaves. Their uniform was woven through with living vines that flowered and fruited as Eleanor watched. "Good morning," they said, their voice like wind through wheat fields. "I'm conductor time, yes, like the herb. Welcome to the garden of lost hours." "Lost hours?" Eleanor asked, confused. "I don't understand." "All the time you've wasted," Time explained, settling into the seat across from her with a grace that suggested they were as much plant as person. "Or rather, all the time you think you've wasted. Every hour you spent scrolling mindlessly through your phone instead of doing something meaningful. Every evening you told yourself you were too tired to paint. Every weekend that vanished into nothing because you couldn't find the energy or courage to do what you really wanted. All that time isn't gone. It's here, in this garden, waiting." Eleanor felt a pang of guilt and recognition. How many hours had she lost exactly that way? Thousands, probably. Years of her life spent in a fog of exhaustion and distraction. Telling herself she'd paint tomorrow. She'd start that personal project next week. She'd reconnect with her creativity when things weren't so busy. "I can see you understand," Time said gently. "Most passengers do. The Garden of Lost Hours isn't here to shame you, Eleanor. It's here to offer you a chance to reclaim what you thought was gone forever. Time once spent can never be recovered in the ordinary world. But here, the rules are different. Here, you can plant your lost hours and grow them into something beautiful." "I don't understand," Eleanor said. "How does that work?" "Come," Time said, rising and offering their hand. "The train stops here for the entire day, or what feels like a day. Time is flexible in the garden. You could spend what feels like a full day working here and return to the train to find only an hour has passed. Or you might spend an hour and feel like you've lived a week. It depends on what you need." Eleanor took Time's hand and let them lead her off the train and into the garden. The moment her feet touched the earth of the path, she felt something shift. A deep sense of connection to the ground beneath her, to the growing things around her, to time itself moving differently here. The air was perfect, warm but not hot, with a breeze that carried the scent of 1,000 different flowers. Bees moved lazily from blossom to blossom, their buzzing harmonizing with the ticking of the countless clocks. Birds sang in fruit trees, their songs marking time more accurately than any mechanical device. Time led her along winding paths, pointing out different sections of the garden. "Here," they said, gesturing to a bed filled with hourglass-shaped flowers. "Someone is growing back the time they lost to a career that drained them." And there, pointing to a section where vines climbed intricate wire frameworks, "A passenger is cultivating the hours they spent in a relationship that wasn't right for them, transforming that lost time into wisdom." They walked past a woman Eleanor's age, kneeling in rich soil and planting seeds with careful attention. As each seed went into the ground, a number appeared on a nearby sundial, hours being reclaimed, time being transformed. "That's Sarah," Time said. "She's been riding the train for 3 nights now, spending each day in the garden. She lost years of her life to an addiction she's now recovered from. Here, she's taking all that time she thinks of as wasted and growing it into a garden of recovery. Not just for herself, but eventually, when it's fully grown, she'll harvest seeds to start a program helping others." They continued walking until they reached an empty plot, freshly tilled and waiting. A sign at its edge had Eleanor's name on it in letters made of morning glory vines. "This is yours," Time said. "If you choose to plant here, you don't have to." Some passengers prefer just to walk the garden, to see what others have grown from their lost hours. But if you want to reclaim your time, transform it into something meaningful, this is where you do it. Eleanor stared at the empty plot. "What would I plant?" "That depends on what you want to grow from your lost hours," Time said. "What do you wish you'd been doing all that time you spent distracted, exhausted, disconnected from yourself?" "Painting," Eleanor said immediately. "Creating. I wish I'd spent that time making art." Time smiled and reached into their pocket, pulling out a small cloth bag that seemed to contain seeds. "Then these are yours. Each seed represents 1 hour of lost time. When you plant them, they'll grow into whatever you need most to reclaim your creative life." Eleanor took the bag and began to plant. Episode 5, The Bridge Between Worlds. Eleanor woke to the sound of rushing water and found her compartment filled with mist. Not the dense, obscuring kind, but something lighter, more ethereal, as if clouds had decided to pay a visit and were being polite about it. She pressed her face to the window and saw that the train was crossing a bridge. But what a bridge it was! A structure so delicate it seemed impossible that it could support the train's weight, made of what looked like spun glass and moonlight, stretching across a chasm so deep its bottom was lost in swirling fog. Below the bridge, Eleanor could see glimpses of different worlds in the mist. One moment, the fog would clear to reveal a desert of silver sand under 3 moons. The next moment, an ocean of liquid mercury where ships with crystal sails navigated by starlight. Then a city made entirely of stained glass, every building a cathedral of colored light. World after world, reality after reality, all existing simultaneously in the space beneath the bridge. The bridge between worlds, came a familiar voice. Conductor Orion stood in her doorway, looking more otherworldly than usual in the mist-filled light. "This is where your journey reaches its turning point, Eleanor. For nights you've traveled, and each landscape has taught you something. Now comes the test, the choice that will determine whether you reach Aurora Valley or return home unchanged." Eleanor's heart quickened with apprehension. What kind of choice? Come, Orion said, offering his hand. The bridge isn't just something we cross. It's something we walk, experience, become part of. Every passenger must walk the bridge between worlds if they wish to complete their journey. Eleanor took his hand and let him lead her through the train. They passed through carriages she hadn't seen before. One filled with mirrors that showed not reflections but possibilities. Another where the walls were made of water that somehow didn't spill. A third where gravity seemed to be optional and passengers floated peacefully near the ceiling. Finally, they reached a door at the very front of the train, just behind the engine. Orion opened it, and they stepped out onto a platform that extended from the train's front, suspended impossibly over the chasm. The bridge stretched ahead of them, delicate and strong, beautiful and terrifying. It was wider than it had looked from Eleanor's window, wide enough for 10 people to walk abreast comfortably, but it still seemed too insubstantial to be real. Through the translucent material of the bridge's surface, Eleanor could see the swirling worlds below, each one calling out with its own reality, its own truth. Other passengers were on the bridge, walking slowly, some alone and others in pairs or small groups. Marcus was there, his violin on his back, pausing to look down at a world where music seemed to be a visible, tangible thing. Miriam was further ahead, her knitting needles clicking as she walked, creating something that glowed with each stitch. The bridge between worlds is where we confront duality, Orion explained, his voice somehow clear despite the rushing wind. Every person lives between worlds, Eleanor. The world as it is and the world as they wish it to be. The person they've become and the person they truly are. The life they're living and the life they dream of. Most people spend their entire existence paralyzed by this duality, unable to commit fully to either world, stuck in the middle, never quite here or there. He gestured to the bridge beneath their feet. To reach Aurora Valley, you must walk this bridge and make a choice. Not a choice between the worlds. You can't choose to only live in dreams or only in reality, but a choice to integrate them, to find a way to live in both simultaneously, to be both who you are now and who you're becoming. Eleanor looked down at the worlds swirling below. In one, she saw herself in a beautiful studio, painting with complete freedom, supported by grants and sales, living the artist's life she'd always dreamed of. In another, she saw herself at her current marketing job, comfortable and secure, never taking the risk to change. In a third, she saw herself having already failed, tried to paint, produced terrible work, embarrassed herself, proved right everyone who'd said art wasn't practical. I don't know how to choose, Eleanor said, her voice small against the vastness of the chasm. Every choice feels like it means giving something up. That's because you're thinking of choice as subtraction, Orion said gently. This or that. But what if choice could be integration? What if you could be both practical and creative, both secure and adventurous, both who you've been and who you're becoming? He pointed to the bridge itself. Look closely at what you're standing on. Eleanor knelt and examined the bridge's surface. Up close, she could see it was made of countless threads woven together, threads of different colors, different materials, different strengths. Some were thick as ropes, others delicate as spider silk. Some glowed with light, others seemed to absorb it. But they were all woven together into something stronger than any single thread could be. Every thread is a choice, a possibility, an aspect of self, Orion explained. The bridge doesn't ask you to choose one thread. It asks you to weave them all together into something that can hold your weight as you cross from who you were to who you're becoming. He straightened and smiled at her. Walk the bridge, Eleanor. And as you walk, listen to what each world below tells you. Let them show you all your possibilities. Then, when you reach the middle, there's a platform there. You'll know it when you see it. That's where you make your integration. That's where you weave your threads together and decide what kind of life you're going to build. With that, Orion stepped back into the train, leaving Eleanor alone on the platform at the bridge's entrance. She took a deep breath, touched the seed from the garden of lost hours that she still carried in her pocket for courage, and stepped onto the bridge between worlds. The moment her foot touched the bridge's surface, she felt it, a thrumming vibration that seemed to resonate with her heartbeat, as if the bridge was alive and aware of her presence. The worlds below swirled faster, each one calling out to her, showing her possibilities. She walked slowly, letting herself look down despite the vertigo it induced. In world after world, she saw versions of herself. Some successful, some struggling, some happy, some lost. Each world showed her a truth, but also a warning. None of these futures were complete. They each represented choosing one thread and abandoning the others. Then she saw it, the platform Orion had mentioned. It was circular, maybe 15 feet across, made of the same translucent material as the bridge, but somehow more solid, more present. In its center was a loom, ancient and beautiful, with threads of every imaginable color hanging from it, waiting. Eleanor stepped onto the platform and approached the loom. And there, she began to weave. Episode 6. The Singing River. Eleanor woke to a sound like joy made audible. The train had stopped beside a river, but this was no ordinary waterway. The water itself was singing, not metaphorically, but literally producing music as it flowed. Each ripple and current created a note, each swirl an eddy a chord, and together they formed a symphony of such complexity and beauty that Eleanor felt tears spring to her eyes the moment she heard it. She rushed to her window and saw that the river was vast, flowing through a valley of flowering meadows. The water wasn't blue but prismatic, containing all colors at once, and as it caught the light of the rising sun, it threw rainbows into the air that dissolved into musical notes before fading away. The train was parked at a station made of river stones and driftwood, and many passengers were already disembarking, drawn to the water's song. Eleanor dressed quickly and hurried outside, wanting to experience the river up close. The moment she stepped onto the station platform, the music surrounded her completely. It wasn't just sound. It was sensation, emotion, memory, all woven together through melody. She heard joy and sorrow, celebration and grief, love and loss, all the feelings that made up a human life, translated into song. Conductor Harmony was waiting by the riverbank, their crystalline hair catching the morning light and scattering it in rainbow patterns. They smiled when they saw Eleanor approaching. "The singing river," Harmony said with evident affection. "This is one of my favorite places on the entire journey. The river sings every story, every emotion, every truth that exists. If you listen carefully, you can hear your own song within it." Eleanor moved closer to the water's edge. The river was clear as glass, and she could see to the bottom where smooth stones seemed to glow with their own light. Fish swam past. If they were fish, They looked more like living flames in the shape of fish, trailing sparks as they moved. Water plants swayed in the current, each one producing its own melody that harmonized with the river's overall song. "What am I supposed to do here?" Eleanor asked, though part of her wanted simply to sit and listen to the music forever. "Whatever calls to you," Harmony said. Some passengers wade into the river and let the water sing through them. Others sit on the bank and listen for their own song within the greater symphony. Still others bring instruments and play along, adding their voice to the river's song. There's no wrong way to experience the singing river. It meets you where you are. Eleanor noticed Marcus standing knee-deep in the water, his violin in hand. He was playing, his bow moving across the strings, and his music wove seamlessly with the river's song. Where the two met, the water glowed brighter, creating spirals of light and sound that rose into the air like visible music. Miriam sat on a large flat stone, her feet dangling in the water, her knitting in her lap. But she wasn't knitting. She was just sitting, listening, tears streaming down her face. The river seemed to be singing something specifically to her, a melody that was simultaneously heartbreaking and healing. "The river sings truth," Harmony explained, following Eleanor's gaze. For Miriam, it's singing the truth of all the years she lost to fear, yes, but also the truth of the courage she's found since. It's a difficult song to hear, but necessary. The river never lies, but it also never judges. It simply sings what is. Eleanor took off her shoes and rolled up her pants, then stepped into the river. The water was neither cold nor warm, but something else. Alive, aware, welcoming. It swirled around her ankles, and immediately she heard a shift in the music. A new melody emerged, one that was undeniably hers. The river sang her story. She heard her childhood, the bright, innocent notes of a girl who loved to create, who saw beauty everywhere and tried to capture it with crayons and finger paints and eventually brushes. She heard the warm, strong bass line of her grandmother's love, the way that relationship had been the foundation of her artistic identity. Then the melody grew more complex, adding minor keys as Eleanor heard the story of her adolescence. The joy of discovery tempered by growing self-consciousness, the excitement of learning technique shadowed by increasing pressure to be practical, to plan for a realistic future. The song shifted to her college years, bright passages where she'd thrived in art classes, darker ones where she'd struggled with required business courses she'd been told to take as a backup. She heard the moment she'd declared herself an art major, a soaring note of commitment, and then the gradual diminuendo as that commitment had wavered under the weight of family expectations and financial concerns. She heard the day she'd graduated and chosen marketing over art. The river sang it as a door closing, a light dimming, a voice going quiet, not with judgment, but with sorrow, as if the river itself mourned for that loss. Then came the years that followed. The river sang them as repetition, the same themes cycling over and over. Wake, work, sleep, repeat. Small pleasures that didn't quite satisfy, small pains that accumulated into numbness. The song wasn't ugly, but it was monotonous. A melody that went nowhere, building to nothing, a story stuck in the same chapter. Eleanor felt tears running down her face as she heard her life sung back to her in such stark honesty. This was who she'd been. Not a villain, not a failure, but someone who'd slowly, gradually stopped living her truth, who'd let her song fade to a whisper. But then the melody changed. The river sang what came next, the moment she'd found the ticket to the midnight train, the decision to board, the journey she was taking right now. The music became complex, rich, full of possibility. She heard all the lessons she'd learned represented in song. The forgotten dreams in the luminous forest as sprouting seeds, the reflections in the glass lakes as harmonies and counterpoint, the listening in the crystal caverns as a deep bass line that grounded everything else. The river was singing not just what had been, but what was becoming. Eleanor's song was still being written, still being composed, and it was growing more complex, more authentic, more true with each day of this journey. Beautiful, isn't it? Harmony said softly, having waded into the river to stand beside her. Your song. Eleanor closed her eyes and let the river's song wash over her. And then, for the first time in years, she opened her mouth and began to sing back. Episode 7, Aurora Valley. Eleanor woke to silence. After 6 nights of magical soundscapes, glowing forests, singing crystals, rushing rivers, the hum of the train itself, the silence was so complete it felt like a presence. She opened her eyes and saw that the train had stopped. Outside her window was a valley unlike anything she'd imagined. Aurora Valley. The landscape glowed with soft, dancing lights, curtains of color that moved like northern lights but were somehow also solid, somehow also alive. Greens and blues and purples flowed across the sky and through the valley itself, creating waves of luminescence that passed through trees and hills and water without disturbing them. The lights seemed to come from the earth and the sky simultaneously, as if the valley existed at the meeting point of all sources of illumination. But it was the feeling of the place that truly struck Eleanor. Even from inside the train, separated by glass and distance, she could sense it. A profound peace, a deep rightness, a sensation of finally, after a long journey, arriving home. All the conductors were waiting in her compartment, Orion, Luna, Harmony, and Time, along with several others she'd seen but not formally met. They stood in a semicircle, their otherworldly forms somehow more visible here, in this place where magic and reality merged completely. Aurora Valley, Orion said simply, gesturing to the window. You've arrived. Eleanor stood on trembling legs and moved to the window, pressing her palms against the glass. The valley was vast, containing forests and meadows, lakes and rivers, mountains and caves. But all of it was suffused with that dancing light, that aurora glow that made everything beautiful, everything sacred. She could see other passengers already outside, some walking slowly through the glowing meadows, others sitting in quiet contemplation, still others lying in the luminescent grass and staring up at the lights dancing overhead. Some were passengers she recognized from this journey, but others were strangers, perhaps from previous trains or trains that had departed from different stations, all converging here, in this valley where transformation became complete. This is where your journey ends and begins, Luna said softly, stepping forward to place a hand on Eleanor's shoulder. Everything you've experienced over the past 6 nights has been preparation for this moment. The moment you step into Aurora Valley and decide who you will be when you return home. I don't understand, Eleanor said, though part of her did, part of her that existed beyond words and logic. What happens here? That depends on the passenger, Time explained, their vine-woven form rustling gently. Aurora Valley shows you your authentic self, not as potential, not as possibility, but as reality. Here, the person you truly are becomes visible, undeniable. For some, this is a joyful reunion with a self they've long known. For others, it's a revelation, seeing clearly for the first time who they've always been beneath all the masks and compromises. And then, Eleanor asked, her heart pounding. "Then you choose," Harmony said, their crystalline hair catching the aurora light and scattering it in rainbow patterns. "You can accept what you see. Accept your authentic self and commit to bringing that self back with you into the ordinary world. Or you can reject it, leave the valley unchanged, return home as you were." The train doesn't force transformation. It only offers the possibility. Orion opened the door to the train platform. "Come, let us walk with you into the valley. Let us show you who you truly are." Eleanor stepped off the train onto a platform made of white stone that glowed with its own gentle light. The moment her feet touched the stone, she felt it. A shift in her entire being, as if she was seeing herself from outside, from above, from every angle simultaneously. The conductors led her along a path that wound down from the platform into the valley proper. As they walked, the aurora lights danced around them, through them, and Eleanor realized they weren't just light. They were something else, something more. They were pure being, pure authenticity, the essence of what it meant to be truly oneself without filter or pretense. They walked past a grove of trees that seemed to be made of living aurora, their trunks solid but translucent, their leaves catching light and transforming it into something even more beautiful. Birds nested in their branches, birds that sang not with voices but with colors, each song a symphony of hues that expressed emotions too complex for words. They walked along a stream where the water was perfectly clear and perfectly still, despite seeming to flow. Eleanor looked into it and saw not her reflection but something deeper, her essence, her core, the irreducible truth of who she was. A creator, a seeker of beauty, a woman who transformed vision into visible form. An artist not as a profession but as fundamental nature. "This is the stream of true sight," Luna explained. "Most passengers spend hours here, simply looking, simply seeing themselves without all the stories they tell themselves, without all the roles they play. Just seeing." Eleanor knelt beside the stream and looked deeper. She saw herself not as others saw her, not as she saw herself in ordinary mirrors, but as she truly was. All her contradictions and complexities, all her fears and courage, all her mistakes and growth, all woven together into a person who was imperfect and beautiful, flawed and worthy, still becoming and already complete. They continued walking until they reached a pavilion on a hill where 7 mirrors stood in a circle, the mirrors of integration. Each mirror showed Eleanor through the lens of a different landscape. The luminous forest, the glass lakes, the crystal caverns, the garden of lost hours, the bridge between worlds, the singing river, and finally, here in Aurora Valley itself. The 7th mirror showed her integrated self, the person who had traveled through all these landscapes and allowed them to change her, the person who had learned and grown and chosen, again and again, to become more authentic, more true, more herself. "This is who you are," Orion said, standing beside her. "Do you accept her?" Eleanor stared at the woman in the mirror, herself, but somehow more. "Yes," she said, her voice steady and clear. "Yes, I accept her. I accept myself. All by myself. I commit to bringing her home, to living authentically, to being this person even when it's hard. The moment she spoke those words, the 7 mirrors blazed with light, and Eleanor felt something fundamental shift inside her. She was changed, truly, irreversibly changed. Soon after, the return journey began, and Eleanor carried Aurora Valley within her. Not as memory, but as reality. When she finally stepped off the train back onto platform 13, back into her ordinary world, she was different. The world might look the same, but she would move through it differently. At home, she immediately retrieved her art supplies and set up a workspace by the window. She picked up a brush, touched it to paint, touched it to canvas, and made the first mark. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. It was honest. It was her. This was just the beginning. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new choices, new opportunities to honor the integration she'd woven. But tonight, she had paint on her hands and purpose in her heart. And for the first time in years, she was truly, courageously, completely herself.